Hey guys, and welcome back. So, if you've been watching the last couple videos, right, you know that we have spent some time getting to know some very incredible plants, right? We've talked about Tulsi, aka holy basil. We've talked about blue vervain. We've talked about skullcap, passionflower, valerian. We did oats a while back, right? When I was just before I had kind of organized things. We've talked about Motherwort recently, and each one has taught us something different about the nervous system. But today, we're not learning about a nerve. We're moving more into formulation. And I want to teach you again how to think like an herbalist when you get to this point, right? And this is really the reason that we studied all those herbs in the first place. So I want to start with something a little personal, because I do think personal stories are relatable and helpful. So I grew up in a home where perfection was expected. Mistakes weren't just mistakes. Sometimes they came with harsh words and severe punishments with a side of fear, just depending on what the specialty was of the week. I've had things said to me that no child should ever have to hear. And there were moments that taught me consistently to watch my surroundings, read people's moods, and always stay one step ahead. And for years, I thought this was just simply my personality. I thought I was just simply a perfectionist. I thought I'm just naturally independent. I thought I was someone who always needed to stay busy. But years later, after studying the body and trauma responses and all of those types of things, right, I realized something. They're not just personality traits. Many of them were survival strategies. Now, my story is not everybody's story, and it's definitely not an excuse to be a crappy person. Some people grow up in homes that are full of screaming and yelling every day, right? Some experience homes full of addiction, divorce, military service, financial instability, chronic illnesses, bullying. Maybe you as a child became the caregiver for your parents. Maybe you lost your parents at an early age or a sibling. Trauma wears many different faces, right? But often our nervous system responds in a very similar way, right? You hear that all the time, right? My body doesn't know the difference between I have to send an email versus I'm being chased by a tiger. And that's kind of what we're going to step through today. And one of the biggest lessons I've learned, right, is I don't care how they market it, your nervous system is not your enemy. Believe it or not, it is trying to keep you alive. And a good analogy for this is the smoke detector, right? So if there's a fire, you want your smoke detector to scream, right? That's exactly what the smoke detector is designed to do. But let's just say you have a smart smoke detector, right? And it becomes so sensitive that burning toast or steam from a shower or just lighting a candle will cause the smoke detector to go off, right? Well, it doesn't necessarily mean it's broken, right? It's just become incredibly good at detecting the danger that could be in your home. And that's what your nervous system can do after a while. It detects the danger that's affecting your body. And when you've lived through prolonged stress or difficult experiences, well, your brain becomes very good at watching for danger. It's not a weakness. It's an adaptation and survival mode, right? So here's where it kind of gets a little interesting, right? After years of living that way, we do a really good job of not questioning it anymore, right? That's just reality. That's just how it is, right? We start by giving ourselves coping mechanisms, right? I'm just anxious. I'm a perfectionist. I don't sit still. I always have to be productive. I can't relax. That's lazy. I have to stay in control, right? I'm a control freak. I I always expect the worst, right? Plan for the worst and, pray for the best. Well, maybe that's true. Or maybe your nervous system simply became very good at keeping you safe. And there's a difference. One says, this is who I am, right? This is my personality. This is who I am. And some people can have those personalities without trauma, absolutely. But the other one says, this is something my nervous system learned, and that difference matters, right? Because what was learned can be supported as we heal and grow, right? So one thing I think our culture gets wrong is how we talk about stress. We treat stress like it's one thing, but it's not. Stress can come from grief. Stress can come from raising children, office deadlines, taking care of aging parents. Mental load can play into stress, financial hardship, divorce, difficult childhood. Again, none of these reasons are a reason to be a complete jerk to everybody, but they kind of paint the bigger story. Like, I'm bare if I don't get enough sleep, right? Most of it sometimes comes from carrying responsibilities that just never seem to end, right? And two people can say, I'm stressed, yet their bodies may be experiencing that stress in completely different ways, right? That's why herbalists do not stop at the symptoms. We run through our barrage of questions, right? So, we've learned 7 herbs, so let's talk about 7 different people walk onto the porch tonight. I'm going to have some questions of how you found me, but other than that, every one of them says exactly the same thing. I'm stressed. Do they all receive the same herb? Well, no. Absolutely not. Because stress isn't a diagnosis. It's the beginning of the conversation, right? So the first person says, my mind races all night, right? So you're going to think about herbs that traditionally have been used to support an overactive mind. Second person says, well, I carry everyone else's burdens and I just can't seem to put them down. Well, that's a different pattern. Someone else says, I have been through years of stress and I just feel completely depleted, or burnt toast, if you will, right? Well, that's something else, right? And someone else is going to say, well, I fall asleep great, and I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning on the dot. Well, that's something else. Another person says, I've become emotionally exhausted, right? So these are all different patterns, and notice something, right? They all started with the same word of, I'm stressed. But they're very different stories, and some of them could probably tie over into each other, right? The person with racing thoughts might wake up at 2 a.m., right? Like, so there's a lot of overlap, and that's why you ask the questions. So let's think about the nervous system and the herbs that we have talked about, right? So Tulsi reminded us that resilience isn't about carrying more. It's about adaptation and adapting without losing yourself. Blue Vervain shows us what happens when we carry the weight of the world, right? Skullcap reminded us that a racing mind, how that feels. Passionflower taught us that sometimes it's not our body that's awake, it's our thoughts. And Valerian reminded us that sleep isn't always the same as restoration. And Oats will show you that rebuilding often takes time. And then Motherwort actually challenged us to rethink resilience itself, right? So notice what these herbs have in common, right? None of them are simply stress herbs. Each one represents a different pattern in life. And sometimes you have to use them interchangeably, right? That's why one herb doesn't work for everybody. So what does the herbalist actually think about when presented with the I'm stressed, right? So let's imagine you have stepped onto my porch tonight. It's hot, so make sure you dress accordingly. But you say, Sarah, I'm stressed. Okay, so My first thought isn't what herb can I give you? It's curiosity. Tell me more. How long has this been going on? What changed recently? How you been sleeping? What's your digestion looking like? What's your energy level? What time of day is your hardest? For me, that's 3 p.m. If anybody's keeping track, 3 p.m., man. I'm just like, ugh. What makes it better? What makes it worse? What does your support system look like? Do you have a support system? What brings you joy? What drains you? Probably should stay away from that. Yeah, a lot of women looking at their children right now. Don't get rid of your children. What medications are you currently taking? Do you have any health conditions, recent health conditions, recent diagnoses, right? Like, I'm not trying to be nosy. I care, but I don't care, right? I'm trying to understand your story, because herbalism isn't just about plants, it's about people. And this is where formulation begins, right? Not with the herb, with listening. So once I began to understand the whole picture of you, right, and what's going on, right, you've rattled through all your symptoms, right? And so now we have to figure out, do we need herbs that support restful sleep? Do we need herbs that support long-term depletion? Do we need herbs that calm the overactive mind? Do we need herbs that support digestion, because that chronic stress has affected your appetite? Do we need herbs that support your cardiovascular health alongside your nervine support? So a good formula isn't built because someone says, I'm stressed. And really, that's how it kind of feels like on social media, right? But it's built because it recognizes the patterns, and sometimes the formula isn't just herbs. Sometimes it's herbs and better sleep, maybe some healthier boundaries, nutritious food, right? Can't eat at Burger King every night, guys, and be like, I don't know why I feel like crap. We can't sit in our chair all day and never move and not figure it out. Maybe we need to spend some time outdoors. Maybe we need to spend some time in prayer. Maybe we need to spend time with friends. Or if it's really bad, maybe we need counseling or therapy when appropriate. Maybe we need to find joy, right? As adults, we have a hard time finding joy in our life because it's always this go, 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 right? And that is holistic health in a nutshell, right? If there's one thing herbalism has taught me, it's compassion, right? And I know it's easy to judge, right? Especially people. People watching is fun. And I used to wonder, a lot, right? Like, why can't they just calm down? Now I wonder what their nervous system's been through to give that reaction, right? Used to see the nervous Nellies, the anxious people, right? And wonder, what in the world? But now I'm like, wow, what have you survived, right? Controlling people who hurt you that you had to create safety. The shift changes not only the way that we look at the herbs, but it changes the way we have grace for people. Again, growing in grace. So, as we close the Nervine system, right, I don't want you to remember 7 different herbs, right? We're not doing the 7 dwarfs of the Nervine system. Behind every request for a stress herb, you have to remember there is a person, and that person has a story, and that person has a history. And the nervous system probably has spent years in survival mode, and they're just barely hanging on. And your job as an herbalist isn't to erase that history. It is to listen carefully, ask thoughtful questions, respect the complexity of the person's experience. Do not cast judgment. You are not a therapist or anybody else. And then thoughtfully consider where herbs may fit into a much better picture of healing and health. Because herbs are powerful, but they're only one part of the puzzle. They're not a replacement for medical or mental health treatment when it's needed. Never. So, I hope this series has helped you do more than memorize herbs, right? We're looking at the big picture, guys. I want it to make you think differently. I want to make you curious. I want to make you compassionate. And the more thoughtful we are, right, it's going to change the way you approach herbalism. So this kind of closes out the Nervine herbs that I wanted to talk about. And there are others, right? We're going to continue other things, but this is kind of just branching into the different systems, the different formulations, and it helps to kind of keep us moving through instead of just, here's that lady talking about another freaking plant. But for the fun of it, I have put a tea recipe in the description below, one that can support the Nervine system. Remember, these are not heal-alls. This is just a fun experiment to try to see if you'd like it. And so we've got the recipe below, and so it's in percentages, and so it's based off a pound, like if you want to do a pound. So if you're going to do less than, you're going to cut that, but it's a nice little tea recipe that I personally enjoy when I just want to sit down and be like, put my butt in a chair and focus on rest and recovery, right? So until next time, guys, stay rooted, stay curious, and as always, keep growing in grace.